Who would have thought a trip to a cemetery would be so intriguing? But when it's Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, you're talking about a whole new level of cemetery. Woodlawn is a 400-acre cemetery located in the northern Bronx at the end of the number 4 train. This is not one of those ancient New England cemeteries haunted with ghosts and goblins. Woodlawn was first established in 1863 by some prominent New Yorkers who wanted a convenient, well-trimmed site for their final resting place. It's a non-sectarian cemetery welcoming people of all religions or none, and you don't have to be wealthy to be interred here. So while it's dominated visually by the rich and famous, anyone and everyone can still find a spot there, even though there are already about 310,000 people interred at Woodlawn. Simple gravestones and incredibly ornate memorials and mausoleums join together to create, as the National Park Service says, the largest and finest collection of funerary art in the country. Over 100,000 people visit Woodlawn every year. And while we're there, we saw a small group of mourners commemorating the passing of a loved one at a recently consecrated grave on a hillside, among the smaller headstones. They were gathered together, playing pop music, and undoubtedly remembering the life of their deceased friend. First, we'll take a little drone flight over the cemetery. While we're up there, we'll get a little bird's eye view of the Bronx and its surroundings. The first thing you notice is that knot of buildings straight ahead in the distance. I believe that's downtown New Rochelle, which is on the northern Long Island Sound coast north of the Bronx. Closer in the near distance here now is Co-op City, a large conglomerate of cooperative apartments in Pelham Bay area. That's over in the East Bronx. I-95, the highway actually slides sort of around the west side, the western edge of that apartment complex. Way, way off. And you can see coming up. It's coming up here. There you go. Way off in the distance is Manhattan. That's about 12 to 15 miles away, southwest of Woodlawn Cemetery. Those nearby tall buildings, by the way, are apartment buildings built in the brutalist architectural style that is modern and very ugly. And then as coming around now, you're looking at other parts of the Bronx, and now coming around, you'll see a white building. It's very tall. It's in Riverdale, part of the Bronx that runs alongside the Hudson River. I believe that's the Russian living quarters for the embassy personnel. I've heard that it is built on the highest part of New York City in order to be able to use its many antennae to listen very undiplomatically into the secret conversations of Americans and other diplomatic personnel. But that may be just a rumor. And we're coming back to this area around here. Now, what we're going to be doing is take a look at the cemetery itself. So as you're looking down at the cemetery, it doesn't look that imposing. You have to really be down there and walking around to get a real feel for the cemetery. Yeah, as we swing around, you can see the Bronx River Parkway down below, which runs along the eastern edge of the cemetery. One funny thing I noticed about the cemetery, and I guess it's a phenomenon that you don't notice in other cemeteries because they are so much smaller, is the enormous amount of obelisks all over the place. They reminded me of punji sticks that were stuck into the ground in Vietnam as booby traps for unsuspecting soldiers and Marines to fall onto as we traipsed across the sylvan forests of Southeast Asia some 50 years ago. Which gives me a great idea. If Godzilla ever made it back to New York, we can always drop a few hundred tons of smelly chum onto Woodlawn, and when Godzilla came to fill his tummy, he'll step on a bunch of obelisks and end up limping up to the Adirondacks, never to be seen again. Yep, and there he goes. Goodbye, Godzilla. Now here we are, we're flying over toward the main entrance to Woodlawn, located on Jerome Avenue. When you come up to it, you'll see that red-roofed building. You see a little weird building. It's a subway station at the end of the line of the number 4 train. And we see it coming up to upper left over there. Up in this part of the Bronx, though, the subway is actually an elevated train, or an L, running on steel pillars above the streets. It sinks into the ground as it approaches Manhattan. As we swing around and head back in the northeasterly direction, notice all the buildings in the cemetery. They're actually large mausoleums and monuments to the dead, many of the sizes of small houses, and some of rather large houses, each for an individual or a family that wanted to memorialize themselves. When we walk through them later, they're much more impressive close up. Here we are driving along Jerome Avenue, coming from under the L and into the Woodlawn Cemetery. Yeah, that car on the right just cut us off. The cemetery is open to the public, and there is free parking inside. In fact, you can drive your vehicle all around Woodlawn and park wherever you want within reason. And there are public restrooms right at the entrance there over on the left. I started my visit by walking around the streets near the entrance. You would think you were in a weird neighborhood of small exotic houses with no one home. That monument up over there on the right, we're coming up to it, or over on the right there, is actually for Mr. Woolworth of department store fame, for those who can remember that far back. But I guess you could say we're really in a city of the dead. I walked through a lot of it, but in order not to bore you, I'm just giving you some highlights. If you visit here yourself, a casual walk around is really an amazing experience. These streets seem to go on forever. And as you'll see, a lot of these mausoleums also have small grave markers to mark individual family members. And the foliage here is amazing. When you look at it, they say they have 140 trees that you look at. There are birds and a lot of animals that live in this area. It's really quite amazing. And it's actually a nice calm place to take a nice stroll or a walk, or I wouldn't jog here, but a nice walk through these areas here. It can be very calming. Here we come upon the memorial to Louis Untermeyer and his family. We will be doing a video, probably our next one, of the Untermeyer Park in Yonkers, the city just north of the Bronx, which was originally the family estate located alongside the Hudson River. It's quite a beautiful park. And here in Woodlawn, we have the gravesite of Miles Davis, the famous jazz trumpeter. I'll put a link down below to one of his songs. And it makes sense that across the street from the Davis Monument is the extraordinary monument to Illinois Jacquet. Jacquet was a famous jazz saxophonist. Early in his career, he played the song Flying Home, originally by Benny Goodman and Lionel Hampton. But Jacquet's sax version from 1942 became so famous that later on, sax players would learn his complex version note for note. I'll link it on YouTube. Oh, and I love Jacquet's memorial, the way the notes coming from his sax are in the Buddhist Sanskrit symbol, Om, which represents the ultimate perfection of the universe. That is so cool. Jacquet and Davis actually played together on more than one occasion. I'll leave a link for that too. And feel free to play a little jazz while you watch the rest of this video. Then we get to the monument that memorializes the people who died on the Titanic. It's a beautiful statue and really makes you think about the many souls who found the North Atlantic to be their final resting place. Our souls have sight of that immortal sea which brought us hither. In fact, down the hill from the Titanic monument is the monument to the Strausses. They were an elderly couple on the Titanic. When the ship was sinking, Mrs. Strauss decided to give up her place on a lifeboat in order to die with her husband. Brave woman, rest their souls. A little note on this monument. It memorializes John Harbeck, who made his money in the 19th century in dry goods and later in mining out west. It has the distinction, though, of being the largest mausoleum in Woodlawn, and his childless wife later donated most of the rest of the money for the care of animals when she passed. Then I came across a squirrel carved onto a tree stump. That I did not expect. It looked so cool. And then down the street, I saw a similar carving. It turned out to be a family of owls carved on another tree stump. It was just pretty cool. I don't know where they came from. It was pretty interesting. And then further down, I noticed an eagle carved into yet another tree stump. By then, I was wondering what was going on, and nothing was in the literature about this here. Then I looked around, and down the hill, it looked like another carving was actually in the process of being done. Yeah, this is one of, I believe, a raccoon, and the artist used a little artistic license to get it done. I met him. His name is John Antonik. I'm leaving his info down below in case you want something carved. His son was his helper. And I also talked with a couple of officials from Woodlawn who were visiting the new carving. I asked them which tree was next. They laughed and they said that they only cut down trees that needed to be cut, and there were no more at the moment. But in the future, stay tuned. I'm going to end this video with a beautiful monument that a wife had done for her husband, Vernon Castle Blythe. He was killed during World War I in 1918, only 29 years old, for which he was awarded the French Croix de Guerre, which means the Cross of War. For heroism, they give that to foreigners. They are buried together. So she lived for over 50 years after her husband was killed, and it looks like she remarried, but she never forgot her husband. If you got some pleasure out of this little video and you want to see more like it, please subscribe and click on that notification bell. And thank you.